Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're live from Los Angeles, and this is your host, Young Brando. We're here to talk about watches, and I'm actually going to continue um, the coverage of GPHG 2025 of the competing watches that I had started a few days back. So we will be exploring this particular page. Let me just send the link into the chat. Let me see if it opens the correct section of that site. It does not. That's amazing. So let me see what the specific link is. All right, we are here. Let's delete this first one. All right. I'll pin the link for you to actually join the conversation, join the panel if you like. Rather than this one right here, which is what we are looking at. Um, if you have just joined, please hit the like button. Trust me, I deserve it in advance. Um, but yes, we are talking about the so-called Oscars of horology. I have presented my caveats in the previous episode, so I'm not going to belabor the same point, beat the same dead horse, but I will probably rant a little bit on this one too. I think we made it through to men's watches slash men's complications last time, barring some pieces that I didn't necessarily discuss in detail. But if you have any questions about those earlier categories that I covered in part one, feel free to write in the chat. You know, the first four categories: ladies complication, time only, and man's pieces. And I'm happy to return and reflect. I'm basically, for now, just going through the pieces, trying to see what I would like to highlight. And the thing that needs to be said is when they published this initial list of competing watches, you're really seeing everything, right? There's absolutely no filter. If a watch company, a watchmaker wants to submit a watch, all they need to do is fill out a form, send, I think, about 800 Swiss francs, and they're here. Their watches will appear in this initial list. So there's absolutely no selection, no filter at this point. So it's much more difficult to weed them out than having the final list of nominees, as they call it, rather than finalists, which you can then, I think, tease out much more, well, much better. I basically, knew each and every watch that would probably win the vote, which just tells you also about the general relevance or originality of this competition too, right? I'm not saying that to actually toot my own horn, but just really admit how predictable the industry can be when it comes to these kinds of events. But let's jump back in with the men's complication category. I will start with some of my personal favorites. And again, if you have any questions, if you want to direct my attention to anything, feel free to send in a super chat. And there's a little challenge as well. If I receive a certain number of at least $2 super chats, I'll be going at least until midnight, and we can talk maybe in a more free-flowing way about watches in general and really cover anything that you might like me to cover. André Saint-Genève, as you know, is one of my absolute favorites. They have previously done a collaboration with Asprey's of London, for a world time watch. Of course, Asprey is a very important jewelry and luxury store in London, but they have a particular presence in horological history, especially when you think of like, mid to late 20th century, because they were the ones who delivered all these important Arabic dial customized by Rolex pieces to Oman and beyond, to a lot of different places in the Arab world. So they have that particular legacy in watches, in collaborating with different watch brands, and they wanted to somehow, I guess, build on that legacy in their collaborations with Anderson Genève. And this is the Jumping Hours series that they have done with them. They had previously collaborated on a world timepiece. Those two genres, by the way, when it comes to Anderson Genève, are probably some of their best work historically, and we will see another example in another category of a world timer that they submitted to this competition. They really make some of the best of these watches in the entire industry, actually. As for the world time, obviously they are trying to outdo Patek, and I think they do that very successfully with the level of art and craftsmanship they bring to those dials, beyond, of course, the simple fact that as an independent watchmaker that works on a very limited number of watches, they literally bring bespoke services to you where you can customize many different details of the watch. Of course, with the world time, the important thing, perhaps the most important thing, is the city's ring. Easy work. Here with Jump Hour watches, I think they're really one of my favorite brands as well, maybe along with Chopard, who also make some outstanding pieces in this particular category. The Jump Hour, I've always thought, is the absolute blank canvas for this sort of independent maker to exercise their creative expressions, to let all those juices flow. That can be in the decoration of a particular kind of dial, or it can be even as simple as choosing and sourcing some of the best quality of a stone dial, which they did here. I think the Burma Jade dial here matches beautifully with the platinum case. And it's very unique, right? It's not the first time that we see a jade dial, but a lot of times the stones that Anderson chooses have a lot of grain and a lot of character. And here you can see that as well. It's not just like a greenish blue dial that harkens to like a lacquered quote unquote Tiffany blue or robin's egg kind of color, right? This is really a natural stone dial that sings with its own voice. It is signed, of course, both by Anderson and Asprey. It has, through this aperture at the traditional 12 o'clock, which is for the jump hour, and then the railroad track that you see in the lower part of the dial is, in fact, the minutes. That's the minute hand, right, which is blued right here. I think the cases are beautiful too, with those soldered and shouldered lugs. Very stylish. I think The size is quite reasonable too, 38 millimeters, which means that it is quite modern, but also universally wearable. You might even say unisex to a certain extent. And of course, the action doesn't only end here in the full frontal view. You also have a beautiful display on the back where you have a full gold rotor, guilloche decorated. Made out of 18 karat pink gold with a kind of barley corn pattern, I guess you can call it. Grain d'orge is the French name for it. The case is platinum, if I, for whatever reason, forgot to mention it. And, one of the house specialties they have is blued gold, right? Which here, of course, they did not use on the dial or the rotor, by the way, which is something they do in a lot of their other watches, but they still used a very nice blued ring to frame the dial, hand carved with both brands, Anderson Genève above and Asprey below, a 12-piece series. And I think they are priced at about 85,000 Swiss francs. That's a sizable chunk of money, of course, but I think overall, again, these are so rare and so precious that if you are rolling at that level of independent horology, it's certainly a brand that you should seriously consider. And I think this is a watch that is almost certain to make it to the finals. Again, thank you for tuning in. We're talking about the competing watches at this year's Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. This is part 2 of my coverage. So I talked about, the handful of categories in the beginning, and we are now in men's complication. Another obvious candidate to consider, of course, is the 150th anniversary limited edition of the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar, open worked. This, of course, is a limited edition, again, for the anniversary 150 pieces. However, it's also AP's way of saying goodbye to the open worked version of their legacy ultra thin movement. This was the base of this movement, the so-called JLC 920 that AP had adopted in its various incarnations, was of course the beating heart of the Royal Oak Jumbo for 49 years up until 2022. They continued to use versions of it with a perpetual calendar module in their perpetual calendars. They now have a more ergonomic model, right? A more ergonomic movement that can be adjusted forward and backward, and by each date function through different crown positions. So it's pretty advanced, but for the history buff, so to speak, for those who actually are intrigued by the legacy of of what made AP so special um, throughout their history, but from 1972 forward, which was, of course, the introduction of that Jarajanta design integrated bracelet sports watch. This is pretty important. And also, it is titanium bulk metallic glass, very strange combination in the way that only AP does it, right? You know, it's very similar, I think, aesthetically to what they used to do by juxtaposing platinum with stainless steel, right? Here, of course, you have something much more experimental and much lighter, because you have, in fact, the bulk, no pun intended, of the watch, case, and bracelet rendered in titanium, which is largely grain brushed, except for the classic bevels. And then you have the octagonal bezel, which is entirely polished in bulk metallic glass. Hi, Patek Chris. It's good to see you again as well. So thanks for saying hi. And guys, don't be shy. You know, we don't run loyalty tests here. We don't weed you out because you frequent other channels. In fact, I couldn't possibly care less. I don't watch any other watch channels. I don't consume any other kind of watch content. I've already forgotten 3 times about watches than the average watch YouTuber, gray market salesman, or social media phenomenon has. So I don't need to look at anything they're doing. So don't be shy. Chime in, say something. You know, at least let me know that you are there. It's good to know. I don't have a problem with anyone. So you don't have to hide anymore. This is a safe space. A few things that I like. I mean, you know, I've always liked open working as AP does it, because usually it's not just done for the sake of it. It's done with the purpose of exhibiting the workings of a movement. And with a calendar watch, with a perpetual calendar watch at that, that of course offers a lot. But I also like just the shades of blue they used in this, the particular fonts that they have brought back, which is like a real throwback and kind of something that induces a certain amount of cognitive dissonance, because everything else looks so industrial and modern. And here you have like this classic touch of a traditional signature. But if you think about it, that's exactly what the Royal Oak is about, right? You know, it's a very elegant, ultra thin watch that's at the same time an example of brutalist design, an instance of an industrialist aesthetic, to the extent that even its bracelet looks like a conveyor belt. So these kinds of executions of the Royal Oak, I think, are really revealing something about that, the spirit of that design. And of course, the 150th anniversary open worked perpetual calendar is every bit of that. This was 150 pieces of a limited series, priced right under 190,000 in Swiss francs. And the reference number is 26585XT. The other watch that I want to look at, because it is actually quite unique, is the Beauvais Recital 30. This is their world timepiece. On the one hand, of course, you might say, well, I mean, what is, what is really um, that unique or original about a world time? Nowadays, even budget brands might have a world time watch that it shouldn't really excite all that much. However, this is what they present as the ultimate world timer, meaning that it is actually they are actually the first brands, first with the Recital or Recital 28, now with Recital 30, that can accommodate for the changes in daylight saving time, right? Because all world timers were in fact wrong during the daylight saving time periods, because there's no way for the movement, well, no one had come up with a movement that could actually make the corrections accordingly. And you'll see very quickly that the city names are actually on rollers rather than on a statically laid out or inscribed on a wheel, on a ring. The 24 city rollers are actually printed on 4 sides, and the time period roller is printed with 4 different periods: UTC, American summertime, Europe and America summertime, and European wintertime. So when you press the upper pusher of Recital 30, all the rollers turn 90 degrees at the same time. The cities that don't change for daylight saving time are printed 4 times that city. And the cities that do change, like Geneva, for example, are printed 3 times Geneva and 1 time the city next to it. So in Geneva's case, that would be London, which means that Geneva and London both change position on the dial when they go into daylight saving time. In addition to that, of course, and this is very unique as well, the Recital 30 features New Delhi prominently on the dial, and that is precisely because India has the unique 30 minutes offset for time zones, right? Rather than plus 1 hour, which is usually how, again, world time watches are usually divided, with each city corresponding to a particular time zone. Here they actually have New Delhi, as you see, presented very distinctly, as well as Maldives, by the way, which is also unique, which our one of our own, I Heart Maldives, has been clamoring for. I'm not sure if he ordered one of these watches, but it would be absolutely awesome. He is exactly a member of the intended audience. It's on the black part of the dial, New Delhi is, with a yellow indicator, and the color matched second yellow minute hand is linked to the New Delhi minutes with its 30-minute offset. And of course, speaking of customization options, which we highlighted with Anderson Genève, Beauvais, with its verticalized manufacture in Fleurier, they accommodate such requests for customizations or bespoke timepieces. Now, I don't know what kind of upcharge is associated with that. With Beauvais, I know with Anderson Genève, at the price point you're dealing with, as long as they are requests that they can accommodate simply, like writing the name of a particular city on a city's ring of a world time watch, it's quite reasonable, if not necessarily minimal. So this is also a service that Beauvais offers, and here they have the recital 30, which is their unique world time watch that not only is the only world timer that accommodates changes for daylight saving time, but it also has a special accommodation for, or a special solution rather, for India's, for New Delhi specifically, 30 minutes offset. And this was um, a piece that retails for 73,500 in Swiss francs, including the VAT. The other piece that I wanted to highlight is the Nayahida piece. And I actually want to pull up this video that I saw on Instagram today, where they literally have a shot of one of their makers carving out the dial, which is really amazing. So I most certainly want to share that with you. There we go. I just wanted to find my bookmark on Instagram. This is a new complication they introduced. Now Yahida started its business basically with classic dress watches, conservatively sized, that take after at least some of the aesthetic elements of 1930s pieces from Patek Philippe specifically, with certain modern accommodations, but really not much, because the watches still are quite conservatively sized at around 37 millimeters. They use modified versions of usually the Vajru 7750 movements. I don't actually know what they use specifically as a base movement or as a perpetual calendar module in this particular watch, but I can find that out very quickly. However, again, the movements are so heavily modified, and the art that goes into the hand-carved numerals and indications on the dial so unique and proprietary that it's not really a priority for them to have quote unquote in-house movements. That's what I mean to say. So the Type 6A has a dial crafted from argentium silver, which they claim gives it a very radiant, luminous tone. I think at least from the pictures that I've seen, they seem to be right. The hand-wound perpetual calendar movement, caliber 3025 PC, is actually the same movement that Habring 2 uses. Remember, they have come up with their perpetual calendar split-second chronographs recently. So it's very similar to that, and it is a base movement from Habring 2 combined with a perpetual calendar module from Dubois-Desprez, which again has been for generations widely used for such movement modules and modifications by some elite brands, including, for example, Audemars Piguet. So again, we should by now disabuse ourselves of the notion that an in-house movement is infinitely and automatically better than something that is sourced from specific makers. If it's something exclusive, of course, that might bring added value, but sometimes it's better to go out and source a movement, as long as you still put your unique touch on that movement and on the watch in general. If you don't have the R&D in-house, if you don't have the expertise and experience in-house to actually produce a better movement than what you can source, right? What's the purpose of having an in-house movement that would cost you possibly more if it is going to be a lesser movement than what you can source for less? I mean, it's really dumb, right? It's a luxury that only real vertically integrated manufacturers can afford, and trust me, there are not that many, and even those have to reach out to other makers for certain things, right? Beauvais, for example, that we were just looking at, they're a vertically integrated manufacturer in Fleurier, but they have just started making their own cases, right? Do you know what I mean, right? It's very interesting sometimes how people get to define these terms just to reflect certain trends in marketing. So we're looking at the Nayohida Type 6A, which is their new model for this year. First time they introduced this kind of complication into their lineup, and the price point was 46,000 Swiss francs, including VAT, for this very unique watch. My pet peeve from a design standpoint is with the protruding correctors. I think, especially for this kind of watch that has a very elegant dress watch aesthetic, I think they should have made the effort of making those as unobtrusive as possible, making those genuinely sit flush with the case and not be so visible. Again, with certain watches, especially if it's a vintage piece, you might not care about such details because that's mostly how things were done at a particular point in time in the mid-century. Yes, mid-20th century. But here, when you have so much art going on the dial and such a beautiful case too, it would have been so much better. And certainly at $50,000 price point, I think a customer is right to expect more. John C is keeping on beating that drum, more Breguet. MCM, as a further point, says generic case design. I agree, but in this case, there's, I think, personally, again, these things are very subjective, as you know, MCM. There's nothing wrong with that because that's the aesthetic that they're aspiring to, right? They're not trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to that. They are aiming for classic, simple, Calatrava-like elegance. I'm not gonna necessarily, beat them down for that, but you still have a valid point, right? It's not like they have a very unique case design uh, either. Perhaps you also meant like, because they have a generic case design across the line where they are now accommodating this complication, which needs correctors to properly adjust the perpetual calendar. Yes, you're right. You got it exactly right. But, you know, take another year, right? They always sell out their watches anyways. So take another year to figure out how you can improve that design while still using the same case maker, right? Why not? Um, I think this is a no-brainer as well. You guys know my general misgiving about the Laurent Ferrier Classic Traveler, which has two openings, two windows on the on this horizontal line on the dial, one of which is the date, the other the reference time. And now I just, first of all, I think I'm always in the camp that a travel watch, quote unquote, a world time watch, doesn't really require the date, but that's just me. So they could have done away with the date if they want to have this arc like opening where they show the hour in the other time zone. Um, but that being said, uh, they have chosen to do this, and I think, you know it's not impossible to figure out. In fact, you will get used to it pretty quickly, right? That the right one at 3 o'clock is the date, and the left is the reference time. Sure. But I think visually it still makes the watch very messy, and especially where where you have a watch like this that uh, that front loads the aesthetics. um, you need to do better. And obviously, that Laurent Ferrier was for a long time head of creations at Patek, right? They're head of the design department, so to speak. So he knows a thing or two about watch design that I don't, right? I do want to stay humble. That being said, to me, this particular design never made quite sense, especially because the center of the dial is almost always so beautiful. And in this particular case, it's an entire enameled world map, hence the name Traveler Globe Night Blue, right? An entire world map that kind of imitates the how Earth city likes would look from space, right? The Chanlevé enamel dial center, um, where on a convex white gold plate, the continents appear in an opaque blue enamel color, punctuated with touches of enameled gold. Very beautiful, I think, even in terms of the subtle interplay of the colors on the dial between these deeper, darker shades of blue, touches of gold, and even the circularly brushed cities ring. Um, and of course, they have the classic sliding pushers for the world time, or pardon me, travel time function, where you can move in 1 hour increments the hour hand back and forth. Um, Thank you again for following me. Thank you for being in the chat. Please hit the like button for support. If not anything, that's at least free, and that is actually of great help. It does push the channel forward. For a small channel like mine, it actually does quite a bit. So every bit of those likes actually matter to me minimally. So I would appreciate it, but it certainly helps put this in front of another set of eyeballs, if nothing else. So I would really like that. I will skip over the Urban Jorgensen because I do want to dedicate more time to talk about the revival of the brand. But the new perpetual calendar UJ3 also made this list of competing watches, was also submitted for competition, I should say, with their double wheel escapement. So that's a watch that I would like to talk about on another occasion. I have a small rant when it comes to the iconic watches category. You guys know I had a similar complaint last year when I saw Louis Vuitton's tambour, because fair enough, right? That design apparently existed for about 2 decades before it was submitted as a before it was submitted for competition in this award show. That being said, not every watch that's a recognizable brand name, and Louis Vuitton is certainly not recognizable for the watches they make to begin with. Um, not every model made for those brands that has existed for a decade or two is worthy of the category iconic. And this is really a reflection of how we have used and abused and worn out that word, especially in the category of luxury watches, right? Every single thing is called iconic. It's not only a Rolex Submariner, AP Royal Oak, Brightening Navi Timer, IWC Big Pilot, Rolex Daytona, Hoya Carrera, whatever else. Now every brand has an iconic watch, right? It's not the Cartier Tank, but yeah, we have a Breguet single-handed watch here that somehow belongs to iconic. Why? Right? I love Breguet, but just because they have made watches like this every so often, um, doesn't mean that it's worthy to be considered in the iconic category. In the same way, right? Algae Chamonix. I don't know what is Algae, right? That what is a brand that's not even recognizable to a watch nerd doing in the iconic watches category? Um, Maurice Lacroix icon, right? Because what? Because they have an original spelling of icon in the name of what is one of the most generic integrated bracelet watch designs of all time. Messina Lab Ashmoser chronograph, really? How is that an icon? Right? It's literally like Messina Lab is a brand that hasn't existed 10 years ago. How can they have a watch in iconic watches category that is supposed to be on the same footing as a Royal Oak perpetual calendar, as an original interpretation of Bulgari Serpenti, as an iteration of the Hanhat 417 ES. I mean, we got to be serious at a certain point, right? Piaget and the Warhol, okay. But Parmigiani Fleuriet Tonda PF, what the fuck? I love Parmigiani Fleuriet, but they do not make watches that belong to the iconic category. Especially, it's not going to be the watch that they have reiterated and turned into an integrated bracelet watch just a handful of years ago, right? It's a little bit much, right? Or even the Tudor Pelagos, right? How old is the Tudor Pelagos to be in the iconic watches category, right? So of all the watches submitted, which is 8, 11, 14, 17, I think in earnest, the watches that you can easily, without any contestation, count as iconic are the Royal Oak, the Serpenti, the Hanhat 417S, the Seiko Marine Master, Piaget Warhol, the pieces that might belong, the Tag Heuer Formula One. Pardon me, it's not really my aesthetic, but hey, at least they are emblematic of a certain era of Formula One. Um, Anderson Genève Communication 45, again, because it's Anderson Genève in and of itself is one of the original independent brands, right? That was established in 1990, if I'm not mistaken. So it is celebrating, actually. No, it was established in 1980. So it is celebrating, in fact, its 45th year of existence. Yes, it's not the most generic case design. Yes, they didn't birth the complication or anything, but at least they have almost half a century of history behind them, specializing in that particular complication and having, beyond Patek Philippe, giving some examples of that into the world. But the rest of the stuff, most of it is a joke, really. I respect Eberhard as a brand. I know Favre-Leuba is one of the oldest watch brands, and I commend the efforts to resurrect these brands. But iconic watches, just because they are reviving something that has existed a blue moon ago, I think this is just a useless category. Honestly, it's the kind of category that they should have maybe every 5 years, where you have real strong contenders of actual icons of the industry, right? Not every single iteration of the Royal Oak that happens to exist in a given calendar year deserves to be called iconic either, right? Uh, just to kind of caveat what I've previously said, right? Here, maybe it deserves to be in the conversation, not because the most obvious aesthetic difference of having their particular beige shaded sand gold, but because this is a watch that actually features in the as a Royal Oak their new perpetual calendar complication, right? So that's okay. Maybe that makes it worthy of that discussion. The Bulgari MBNF collaboration, which has a unique interpretation of the serpent-headed watch that we have come to see wrapped around many a woman's wrist, here becomes something futuristic, something that would perhaps please more the petrol heads than collectors of women's handbags. Sure, this is perhaps one of the most legitimate entries in that category. But yeah, a watch doesn't become iconic just because Breguet makes it, just because Eberhard releases it, or just because Favre-Leuba is going through a period of resurrection, right? Hanhart 417 ES, classic flyback chronograph, deserves every bit of that heritage moniker. It appeared on Steve McQueen's wrist. It's gone, right? You know, that does belong to the category. Frank Mueller, Crazy Hours, maybe, right? That's a very unique take on the so-called jumping hour complication that perhaps belongs. But yeah, I think, you know, I've said enough about this category. But, you know, Tudor Pelagos, great dive watch, one of the beautiful representations of a genuine tool watch still in Tudor's catalog at that. Is it an icon? Let's not get carried away. I'm going to take a 2-minute break here just to quickly take a look. Rather, take another bottle of water. Oh, you can look at the first half a dozen watches that are actually competing in the tourbillon category. All right, I am back. We're now in the tourbillon category. I have a couple of pieces that I want to highlight here, which is not a category that I considered very in a detailed way, I should say. Again, the Urban Jürgensen tourbillon with the remontoir, I will leave to discuss another day. There are still a few pieces that I want to highlight. I think the Louis Vuitton Tambour Taiko Spin Time Flying Tourbillon is an interesting piece because, again, it has a central tourbillon that also, and it is also a watch that has a unique story of telling time between the jumping hours take for the hours, for the hour display, and again, just the airy, light design that goes with that, gives the dial its unique dynamic and three-dimensional look. And it has a central tourbillon, a flying tourbillon, meaning that it doesn't have a frontal bridge that impedes your view of the revolution of that regulative mechanism, which is one of the biggest things that gives the dial its dynamism for a tourbillon wristwatch. And the monogram flower is the shape that this flying tourbillon takes. So again, it's one of the more subtle and elegant ways of giving this watch a distinctive signature as a Louis Vuitton piece, right? When you focus here, you can clearly see that the tourbillon is designed like the flower motif that appears in the monogrammed canvases of this famous trunk maker. The piece Tambour Taiko Spin Time is actually rendered in white gold, a relatively oversized case, which I think does not really impede with the design here, does not really compete with the design. It kind of goes with it, if you ask me, but it should be noted, 42.5 millimeters. And the price point, including the VAT, is 167,000 in Swiss francs. The Bulgari Octofinissimo Ultra Tourbillon deserves some mention in this category. It's an integrated bracelet piece executed fully in titanium. As you guys know, Octofinissimo takes as its basis, as its inspiration, one of the octagonal designs that Gerard Janta left Bulgari, but it is given this more sculptural take by Fabrizio Bonamassa Stigliani, who is still with the house, still as their head designer. When it was initially introduced, and I think that might still be the case, with a total thickness of just 1.85 millimeters, this was the world's thinnest tourbillon wristwatch. Parts of the dial are also skeletonized, so that's another unique aspect of this piece. Hand-wound tourbillon that shows up at the traditional 5 o'clock, so to speak. Here we have an offset hours and minutes, offset main dial that's shifted along the axis right to 2 o'clock. Very interesting and beautiful piece that takes the point of something conceptual and makes it actually very wearable and interesting. Of course, again, at a concept-like price point, because this 20-piece limited series actually retails for 635,000 Swiss francs a piece. The other watch that I want to talk about here, before moving on to the next category, is the Chapek Antarctique Tourbillon in Glacier Blue. I guess my bias is showing a little bit. I do like these integrated bracelet designs. And again, even if Chapek Antarctique is not necessarily the most original take on this 70s design idea, it is a beautiful take, at least to my aesthetic, in my not so humble opinion. This is the first time in Watches and Wonders of this year that they have introduced the tourbillon in this particular case. They have used a new in-house movement for that, caliber 9, a flying tourbillon, and there is an interesting central bridge which divides the dial into two equal halves, with the tourbillon cage at 6 o'clock and with an interesting guilloche pattern that they call singularité, that draws your attention to the center of the watch and those open worked bridges. This is a look from the case back. Beautifully decorated, open worked rotor that's apparently made out of 18 carats pink recycled gold. And the piece itself is executed in stainless steel. Case and bracelets, with the bracelets integrating Chapek's initial as its center link in this polished form onto its design. This is the Chapek Antarctique, pardon me, tourbillon Glacier Blue. Their first take on a flying tourbillon, a self-winding one at that, priced at 68,100 in Swiss francs. The next category is mechanical exception. These are watches that are more than, quote unquote, simply complicated. These are watches that actually bring something extra onto the table, whether it is a unique take on a complication or a combination of a number of different complications. It's simply something more than what they categorize under chronographs, world timers, tourbillons, etc. This is something more, and I think nothing can show that probably more than the Global Force Nano Foudroyante. This was a limited edition of 22 pieces. It was Grobel Forcé's 10th fundamental invention, which first appeared in the so-called EWT experimental watch technology series. Entirely crafted in white gold, where the original was white gold and tantalum. The dial is made out of a gold blank finished in rhodium with a blue minute track. So it has this almost opaline white gold appearance. With that outer flange in a crisp blue that matches the hands. The complication basically divides each second into 6 segments using a lightweight red-treated hand that rotates once per second, which is what you see here. That's the foudroyant flashing seconds hand right here. That red hand is driven directly by the oscillations of the balance wheel, which beats at 3 hertz, right, which coincides to 1/6 of a second. It's the flying tourbillon, by the way, a 1-minute tourbillon in which that flashing seconds hand is embedded. And it's also, in a way, a very wearable watch, especially by Grobel Forcé standards, right? It's a case that scales right under 38 millimeters in diameter, and its thickness is 14.3 roundabout. So it's actually quite wearable when it comes to this particular brand. Here's a side view where you can get an idea. The crystal is also domed, so that doesn't allow the watch to be that swelt. Of course, the complication itself takes some space as well. I should qualify what I said in terms of the watch being wearable. Of course, only if you can afford it, because the price, including VAT, is right over $500,000 in Swiss francs, 2,200 in Swiss francs specifically. Another mechanical exception watch that I wanted to look at is the Armin-Strom dual-time GMT resonance. Of course, the resonance or résonance is a concept that today's collector is mostly familiar with from F.P. Jones's famous chronomètre résonance wristwatch, which in which François Paul Jean reworks an idea that he inherits from Breguet. Of course, Breguet had used or realized this concept at most in a pocket watch with around 62 millimeters in diameter, where you have essentially two independent movements with their distinct gear trains and balance wheels that in their proximity through the principle of resonance regulate each other. However, Armin has a particular take in translating this principle of resonance. Where you have two balance wheels still in oscillating in close proximity in resonance, so to speak. There's a patented butterfly-shaped clutch mechanism that allows their vibrations to synchronize, and that is something that you see in the upper third of this dial, of this open work dial. The two separate dials are executed in a much more, pardon me, industrial aesthetic than how Jean's take has it. They are entirely independently adjusted, right? One of the things that people have almost immediately done with their FP Jean chronometre resonance watches were to use them, quote unquote, as GMT watches, using one dial, or rather one movement for local time, one for reference time. Here, they explicitly encourage you to do that with Armin Strom. And there we go. If you have just started watching, this is the part 2 of my coverage for the competing watches at the GPHG 2025. We're looking at the mechanical exception category, the Armin Strom GMT Resonance Manufacturer Edition, which is a series of 50 pieces in stainless steel that realize the brand's unique execution of the resonance principle in a dress watch, in a wristwatch, I meant to say, pardon me. And again, this is a very wearable piece, 39 millimeters in diameter. Here's how it looks from behind. The watch is also right around 9 millimeters in thickness, so quite beautiful. Again, much more industrial in aesthetic, much more modernist perhaps in aesthetic than FP Jean's take through generations, but still quite beautiful. And they're priced right around 95,000 Swiss francs, including VAT. The next category is the chronograph. And again, there are some interesting pieces that I want to highlight. Some because they are unusual, some because they are new to me, and others simply because I like them. And let's start with that just because. It is the Tag Heuer Monaco split seconds chronograph. When I first came in contact with the split seconds, or rather rattrapante version of the Monaco chronograph, that was for the traveling exhibition of the Only Watch charity auction, their 10th edition, or the 2023 edition. And they had a pièce unique version of this chronograph. Here it is a version of it that commemorates their newly re-energized collaboration with Formula One. 10-piece series, 10-piece limited series, executed in white ceramic for the case, with red details that include these unique suspended bridges on which the chronograph registers sit. And of course, Monaco as a design, especially when it first came out with the flipped crown that appeared at 9 o'clock rather than 3. And that was something actually that Hoya introduced at the time to alert the user, alert the wearer that this is a self-winding watch, right? Monaco was the first self-integrated waterproof self-winding chronograph, and it wanted to mark that new era of automatic movements for the chronograph complication with this unique placement of the crown that you don't have to use for winding anymore. However, from that look, it always made sense to me somehow that they would integrate some sort of split-second pusher to the design, but in fact they hadn't done that until 2023. But now here we are, here in white ceramic, case, crown, and pushers. And I believe the Monaco Rattrapante has a movement that has been designed by Carole Forestier Cassapi, but ultimately executed in collaboration with Vauchet, the movement maker in Fleurier, that is also part of the Parmigiani Fleurier ecosystem, so to speak. And that movement is called TH81-0000. When you look at the movement from behind, it has a very unique crystal that gives a full display, even from the sides of the movement, which is also decorated here with unique details, including the outer periphery of the rotor, but also the checkered design of the flag, of course, on the chronograph bridges as well. The piece, again, is part of a 10-piece limited series, but the Monaco split-second chronograph is actually part of their catalog at this point in a couple of different iterations, even though they are also quite expensive and rather limited in production as well. But for this series specifically, the price is set at 155,000 in Swiss francs. The other chronograph that I wanted to talk about is the Angelus or Angelus This is a monopusher piece that has a telemeter scale, which doesn't occur as much in quote unquote modern chronographs. We are used to seeing the tachymeter because of its association with motorsports. We have even started seeing more and more, kind of like a throwback, the pulsometer, right, where you can use the chronograph to thanks to the help of a scale that is graduated, let's say, to 15 or 30 pulses to check the pulse and establish roughly the heart rate of someone, right, for a doctor's watch, doctor's chronograph, so to speak. Here you have the telemeter, and telemeter basically is graduated here in kilometers, and it allows you to measure the distance of an event, right? It's kind of actually the most common use that comes to mind, and it's like a trench complication in that sense, is that when you hear the sound of the weapon, of the artillery that shells your trench or your position, you start the chronograph when you hear the sound and stop when the shelling hits your location, roughly speaking. So you have an idea of how far the enemy is, because the scale where it hits, or rather where the chronograph hits the scale, you will see in kilometers the rough distance of that event, of that the source of that sound from you, because ultimately it's duration divided by the speed of sound, right? Approximately 1240 kilometers per hour. This is a 15-piece limited series housed in 18 karat yellow gold cases, 37 millimeters in diameter, so very classic dimensions for the piece. Beautiful two-tone dial that apparently has this white color with a subtle shine of nickel. The center of the dial has this rather grained finish. Of course, the chronograph counters are snailed, right? This kind of vinyl groove effect, and also framed with golden rings. Syringe hands that are inlaid with luminous material. Of course, there's a centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand, a 30-minute totalizer at 3 o'clock, and continuous running seconds at 9. I really like the design, but for such a relatively small case, I wonder if there could have been a way of preserving the two scales, right? The fine graduation of seconds, as well as the telemeter, without having to squeeze these two registers so tightly next to each other. Because again, I think the seconds, I don't know. I mean, the movement itself, I think, is still small enough. So perhaps that's why they had to accommodated like that, but it feels like there is just the dial is a little too cramped and for no particular reason. Of course, this is a mono pusher or single button chronograph, which means that everything is operated, all the chronograph functions are operated by the pusher that is integrated onto the crown at 3 o'clock. Column wheel with a horizontal clutch, which is a little more traditional. And again, it's a beautiful looking movement. A lot of interest, I think, when you flip the watch around. I just wish the dial was as aesthetically pleasing as the movement caliber A5000, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, I think we are entering the last 20 minutes of the broadcast. I think there will be a part 3. But stay tuned. We have at least this category and perhaps the next to go through. I might just leave after the chronograph. We will see. But guys, once again, I hate to go into this mode, but I'm gonna go into it nonetheless. This channel is completely independent, and as small as it is, I put a lot of work into this and my Instagram as true independent platforms that are based on knowledge and insight and are not funded and funneled and propped up by any industry forces, that are not sponsored by any watch brands or gray market dealers. So as much as I serve you as my only master, my audience, I also need your support. So anything you can do to support the channel in terms of the options that YouTube gives you, in terms of the kind of links and options I provide in the video description, I would genuinely appreciate it. There's no way I can stay afloat otherwise, right? I can only work for free for so long, and that's why in the past I have been so hesitant to come back to live stream. I know, I know, again, it's a small channel, not many people watch it, so the messages are not flowing necessarily. But it would be nice to see a super chat at least once or twice during a broadcast, so I feel like there's some return of the kind of efforts that I demonstrate and the kind of work and preparation I put for this channel. But again, I leave that to your discretion, and I will just continue for the remaining 20 minutes. I told you before that Anderson Genève is a personal favorite of mine. I was also constantly pestering the CEO of the brand for the introduction, or rather reintroduction, of a world time chronograph, because it's one of my favorites. Combination of complications, of useful complications, as it were. And here they actually have done that in a limited series, but they have, in fact, Anderson Genève, pardon me, has upped the ante by introducing the world's first ever split seconds world timer. So it is actually a fusion of a world timer with a rattrapante, with a split second chronograph. It uses a vintage Venus 179 split seconds chronograph movement as its base, in a platinum case that scales right under 39 millimeters in um, diameter. It's less than 12 millimeters thick, which for this kind of this level of complication is actually quite svelte, I have to say. This is how the movement is finished and how it looks from behind. Amazing. And really, they have outdone themselves in this particular piece because of the way or because of the level um, to which they have exhibited or executed haute horlogerie standards in finishing the movement, black polishing multiple components such as the arms of the split seconds clamp, the column wheel, the screw heads, the balance adjustment elements such as the swan neck regulator, the setting index, as well as the Geneva stud plate. The flanks of the bridges and plates are drawn with fine emery buffs, the angles carefully mirror chamfered. The satin finishes are applied to selected surfaces uh, using Pierre de Paris stone, right, to create that interplay of again, mirror polished and satin brush surfaces. The countersinks are polished with ruby cutters, and even the arms of the gear wheels are delicately angle polished as well, right? As you can see, kind of wolf's teeth finish on those gears. This is really a high level of watchmaking. Again, I would settle for a simpler world time chronograph, but I'm happy to see them really outdo themselves in this way. And as you can see, there's a Cities ring that is actually separated into two segments by the 24-hour ring, which of course is divided into two itself, part of it representing in this anthracite-like coloring the so-called morning hours, right, from 6 to 18, and then actually the lighter silvery segment represents the darker hours from 18 to again 6 a.m. The dial, I think, is interesting enough, but to me, it's a little muted, honestly, for the kind of color and aesthetic inspiration that they spark in their usual takes on the world timers and jumping hour watches. This leaves me with a desire for more, but perhaps the intention was such that they would highlight the high horology elements in the movement rather than uh, the aesthetic elements on the dial. I don't know the exact decision making process that went into this, but the case itself is beautiful. The movement is vintage, new old stock, finished to the highest level. Um, the the dial again has many elements that exhibit the same kind of handwork, but I don't know. For me, I feel like I'm asking more. The central chronograph dial is made from solid white gold, vertically brushed, um, applied with classical hour markers, or I think they're actually painted with blue grand feu enamel, as well as the minute tracks and the chronograph scales. So not applied just to fix myself. It's actually hand applied in enamel, which again is an artisanal technique that not many brands use anymore. So there's something to be said about that. Um, and the reason that that 24-hour ring is so subtly divided rather than color coded is because it's crafted from silvered brass, where the day and night sections are defined by their texture rather than simply being colored. The nighttime half is black polished, pardon me, with contrasting matte numerals. The daylight half is satin finished. So those are surface differences that you are seeing in that dial. Beautiful platinum piece, a world timer and split second chronograph in one. Limited run in 8 pieces, 184,000 Swiss francs per piece. I think I will take on maybe 2 more chronographs. I'll take the oddball first, which is the Dior Chiffre Rouge. This is interesting because again, it's a fashion brand that no one really looks for when they are shopping for watches seriously. However, the Chiffre Rouge series has had some decent chronographs, animated or powered rather by the Zenit El Primero movements. Shouldn't surprise, because after all, Zenit as a brand is held by the same conglomerate that holds Dior, and that is Louis Vuitton, or Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton, right? LVMH. This is an interesting take on it because the Chiffre Rouge series celebrates actually its own 20th anniversary. And the piece has that classic asymmetrical case, 41 millimeters in diameter, if I'm not mistaken. Very unique motif on the dial that is replicated by the rubber strap as well. The layout of the dial, which of course owes much to the Zenit El Primero caliber, with the date at 4 o'clock here, is again very proprietary to this design, especially because where you have the 2 chronograph registers, the 2 sub dials for the continuous running seconds at 9 o'clock and the 30-minute totalizer at 3. At 6, you have kind of a quadrant for the 12-hour counter, which is part of the that pattern that they call canage, I want to say. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not such an expert on Dior specifically. A black-red gradient dial, which is very unique. The reset button of the chronograph is a very different pusher, and it is a red pusher compared to the start-stop, which is roughly around 2 o'clock. Again, a very asymmetric and unique case that doesn't look like anything else, but somehow works because it's coming from a fashion house. It is also, again, powered by a respectable chronograph movement, which I think is something that you can say about many so-called fashion watches or watches from fashion brands. This Chiffre Rouge is a stainless steel watch, but as far as I know, it's probably DLC coated to have that jet black appearance. And it's a limited edition of 100 pieces. Again, rubber strap that has that quick exchange option. $14,000, sorry, 14,500 Swiss francs, including VAT, is the price point for this watch. The last piece that I want to talk about is the Roylock Concept split seconds chronograph GMT Grand Date. This is something that existed in the catalog for a while, but is for the first time made in a colored forged carbon, kind of this marbled looking ceramic and forged carbon alloy, housed in a 43 millimeter diameter Roylock Concept case. The watch has a split-second chronograph, rattrapante, with additional flyback functionality, a 24-hour GMT, which is housed in the subdial at 3 o'clock. That's an extra hour hand, which is also color-coded at its stem. Right, to kind of give you an idea of whether it's the day or night in your reference region or city. Grand date, 2-digit display of the date at 12 o'clock. 30-minute totalizer at 9 o'clock, continuous running seconds at 6, an open worked dial that allows you to admire the mechanism that also fits with the industrial aesthetic of the watch, a tachymeter scale on the Reho, if you're a fan of the Roylock Concept as a design, this is, of course, as intriguing as many of the complications that they have released within these lines before. And it's priced, including VAT, right under 190,000 in Swiss francs. That is 189,200 in Swiss francs for this piece. All right, so this was part 2 of my coverage for the GPHG 2025, the so-called Oscars of Horology, that will have its gala in November. They have not whittled down the list to the finalists yet, to the final list of nominees yet. So we are still looking at the competing watches, which are just submitted, right? You know, not submitted to any judgment yet. The jury will go through them. We still have the sports, jewelry, artistic crafts, and mechanical clock categories, as well as petite aiguille and challenge, which are sometimes the most interesting because those are the watches that present some sort of budget option. Challenge being watches that cost less than 3,500 in Swiss francs, and petite aiguille is a watch that costs somewhere between 3,500 to 10,000 in Swiss francs. Of course, there are awards that are not specified here in categories that, in fact, exceed categories. Of course, the big one is the Aiguille d'Or, the golden hand, so to speak, which is given to the best watch of the night. There's one for chronometry, right, which is given to the watch that best exemplifies the aspiration to chronometric precision. I think there was one ecologically conscious awards given last year. There are a couple of others that come up and that are announced in the night from among all the different finalists. So we will take a look at those when the time comes. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. We're going to have the part 3 hopefully tomorrow night. And I will see you in that one. Thank you again for your support. Thank you for being with me. Please don't forget to hit the like button before you jump. Again, next time, please don't hesitate to jump on the panel or ask more questions in the chat. If you want to support the channel, you know exactly how. You can use the options in YouTube. Of course, the memberships give you access to exclusive content and sustains this channel in a way that other kinds of donations and contributions might not. At any rate, those are always welcome, both as super chats and in the comments as well, so-called super thanks, I believe. And there are other options if you want to, if you prefer, that are described in the video description as well. So thank you for everything. I will see you tomorrow night in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.